There's a real sense of anticipation at this time of year. Winter is definitely here. And while the garden is for the most part lying dormant, there is something special happening. Over the next hour, we'll be braving the winter weather to show you Berryfields in a whole new light. Hello. Welcome to Gardener's World Christmas Special. While the early morning frost might give Berryfields a particular beauty, let's not forget that most plants here are now either dormant or dying back. Once the frost has gone, there's a group of plants that really shine out in the winter garden. Evergreens. A couple of days ago, we had the winter solstice, when in the northern hemisphere the sun is at its lowest. And long before Christianity, man was celebrating, and sometimes out of fear, that sinking of the sun by bringing green boughs into buildings, by feasting, by having lights. Now, of course, we do have some evergreens in the garden. This choisia will stay true to its colour throughout winter. We have hellebores, we have mahonia. In the courtyard, Joe has put in plants that will see us through winter by being evergreen. Now, evergreens, of course, are really well adapted to thriving at this time of year. Many of them survived the last ice age, and most of them have got foliage that is tight, thin needles with waxy coverings that can resist both cold and drought, because, of course, when it's freezing, it's effectively a drought position too. What I want to do today is to develop our conifer garden so that we really have a celebration of green. Now, if you remember, in October, I prepared the soil. I added lots of composted bracken, dug it over, added grit, and then placed a few sort of sculptural pieces of wood to get the right feel and tone to relate the planting to. I did put in a few plants, but now we're at the position where I really need to make an impact with the planting. Conifers have dropped in popularity in recent years, and I suspect that's because most people associate them with a style of gardening that was prevalent in the 50s and 60s and 70s, where they were used in island beds, perhaps with heather, or surrounded by gravel, and they were treated as individual specimens. And that somehow doesn't feel very modern. But what we're trying to do here is make something that's new. And I think the way to go with conifers is to use them in a dark, Gothic way. Think Lord of the Rings, or maybe Arthur Rackham. Now, the way to do this, I think, is not to draw out an accurate plan, but just to start to place plants in the ground, in their pots, move them around and get a feel for it. And that's what I've started to do. You can see that here. And I'm starting with this, which is just a Lawson cypress. I say just a Lawson cypress because they are terribly common, but this is a wonderful plant. This is called Little Spire. It'll only grow to 2 meters in 10 years, so small enough for a very, very small garden. And incidentally, a lovely smell too. And I thought if I put this one over here to balance the height that we're building up on the other side, I think I can get that into the ground now. Take my coat off and get it planted. Now, Lawsons will grow almost anywhere, but we have added a lot of composted bracken to encourage the pH to drop a bit. As long as the pH is roughly neutral, they should be fine. Now I'll just take that out, pop it in the ground, make sure it's upright, and then just backfill like that. It is important to firm even a dwarf plant in well, because it'll take a while for those roots to get out into the surrounding soil and steady them. But immediately, you've got the juxtaposition between this beautiful stump and the Lawson cypress, and you're starting to get something interesting. Okay, now over here, there's a podocarpus. Now, this is chocolate box, and at the moment it's touched with brown, but as it gets colder, that brown will intensify, and we'll get some height and change of colour. Don't have to think of conifers as just being green or just variations of yellow. Now, the podocarpus is fairly loose, even though it will grow upright. But the juniper that I planted earlier, that's Juniper communis compressor, is as tight a shape as you can get in a conifer. It grows very slowly. That's about 6 years old, and eventually it'll reach the size and exactly mirror these marvellous sea-worn pieces of wood. But at this time of year, it's not conifers that are the most popular evergreen. It has to be holly, and Christmas without holly is not right. However, Louise Benville Duck in Hampshire feels that any time of the year without holly doesn't seem right.
Things like a moonlit night and a walk in the hollies. That's beautiful. And then in the early summer, when they're all flowering, and you get a still, warm evening, and to walk out here, the beautiful smell of honey. The flowers smell of honey, and it's absolutely beautiful.
Louise has been growing holly at her home in Liss for the last 15 years. Over 4 acres, she has examples of around 150 different varieties. But these won't be cut to make decorations. She sells them to growers as plants in their own right.
I have no horticultural training, but I do love growing things, and the hollies have really not made me into a good gardener, I wouldn't say that, but they've certainly fired my whole interest in the subject. Here is a little formal holly garden. This is one of the very first things I put in, which was originally a little vegetable garden. This is Ilex aquifolium Alaska. It's very hardy and it's enormously free-fruiting. This is Ilex aquifolium Argentea marginata, a hugely popular cultivar. This is the sort of damage done by pigeons. A great fat bird will get in there and knock that down. And it's one of the reasons to keep your hollies really well trimmed, ha-ha. And in a very few minutes, quite an untidy looking bush can be made a lot better. No special skills required. Now, here's an interesting thing. With hollies that have the variegation as the centre of the leaf, like that, we get reversion, some worse than others. Ah, yes, round here. Here is a twig there that is beginning to revert. And it's going back to what the mother plant was, Ilex autoclorensis hendersonii, the great Hendersonii. And that really needs to be taken right out, back to where it comes from. And here is a prime example of a bush being taken over by its reversion. This indeed is Ripley gold, and the bottom is turned completely green, but it's still quite pretty like that. When I first started planting, a whole lot of the hollies just weren't doing very well at all. I was too mean to throw them away, and I thought I'd give them another chance. So I dug a trench up here and just put them in, one after the other. And within a year or two, they decided to be very nice plants and all grew into this beautiful tapestry hedge, and shows people what a beautiful thing a mixed holly screen can be like. It's a magical place, yes. It's a very magical place. But it's the hollies that have done it. It's the hollies that have done it.
Well, I'm a huge fan of hollies, and they can look fabulous when planted formally outside the front door or the porch. But I think, you know, the holly either side, it's a bit obvious. So I'm going to try and get some more colour in. And we've got a fabulous selection of plants here. And there's loads of different planters that you can use, but think about how they're going to fit with the style of your house too. Now, here's a nice tall wooden planter. One of those either side would look good. You could also go for something like this, faux lead, which is nice and lightweight, and it'll give a really solid traditional feel. Planters often come in sets of 3 because they're transported that way quite easily, like Russian dolls, one fits inside the other. So, you know, we can do something quite interesting with those. You get circular ones, but over here we've got some really nice square ones too. So what I'm going to do is make a tiered planter. So the first thing I've got to do with the big planter is put some crocks in the bottom to make sure it drains out nice and freely. And rather than just filling the whole thing up with compost, because this is just some temporary planting we're doing here, I can use polystyrene to help bulk it up. It's important to water well because this is going to make it very, very free draining. And I'm going to do one planter that's going to look great in the sun, and the plants are going to thrive in the sun using lots of pinks. And I'm also going to do another planter that's more for a shady condition, and that's going to have lots of scent as well, which is really nice at this time of year. Just like that, just sits in there, make sure it's even all the way around. And now onto the fun bit, getting the plants in. And I'm going to start with this lovely pink berried Gaultheria, also known as Pinetia as well. And now this planting is not going to be permanent, so think about where you're going to plant these plants after, when they finish in the pot, because these like a slightly acid condition. I think maybe one on each corner would look really good. And between them, I'm going to put some ajuga, which in the garden is known as an evergreen ground cover. I'm using this one, which is called multicolour, and they will colour up much better if they get some sun on them. It's already looking really nice, because the thing about containers is that you usually just see the front side of them, you know, a bare front side. This way we're going to have lots of interest. That's quite a nice combination of colour and foliage there. And the next layer is going to be all cyclamen. And I've got some lovely deep pinks here and some lighter pinks. I'm going to mix them up all the way around. And then for the top, I'm going to put this in, Skimmia japonica rubella, and they're fantastic. They'll last for ages. I'm going to do another one as well for the other side, slightly shadier side of the porch, and that's going to emphasise scent and white flowering plants as well. In the top, I'm going to use this, which is a sarcococca. It's a gorgeous, fabulously scented plant, and it will flower from January right through to the end of February and fill the porch completely with scent. You've got to have one of these either outside your front door or outside your back door, because they're fabulous. And then for some white flowers, I'm going to use these dainty little mini white cyclamen, and they're gorgeously scented too. And I'm also going to put some ivies in, and then these wonderful hellebores are going to sit on the top. So I'm going to get on with it.
Well, it's not just pot plants and beautiful evergreens that give us a fantastic display at this time of year. Here in the long border, I suppose most of our colour is available during the summer, and it's vibrant and marvellous. But at this time of year, it changes to a quieter, more subtle sort of tone. And just look at some of these fantastic seed heads that we've been cutting. We've got cardoons, we've left plenty for the birds too. But look at these wonderful big fluffy seed heads, teasels, all manner of fabulous stuff. But if you want to see dried flowers used in the most spectacular way, then you can't beat a visit to Cotehele Hall in Cornwall. Cotehele sits high above the Tamar Valley. It's one of the least altered medieval houses in the country. Built of granite and slate stone, it's the kind of place you'd dream of spending the festive season. Here they make the biggest garland in the whole country. It stretches from one end of the hall to the other, and it's all made with flowers that they've grown on the premises. But planning for all this began last December, when David, the head gardener, started sowing seeds for the garland. Over a period of a month, thousands are sown. Then in March, pricking out began. And when I arrived in April, the seeds had been hardened off and were ready for planting out. They look so healthy, they really look splendid. I mean, these helichrysums?
Yeah, that's right.
They're just brilliant. I mean, you're completely organic, aren't you, at the
Yes,
trust?
yeah, we've not used any slug pellets at all, and they've really not been a problem.
And they're going in peat-free compost.
All in peat-free compost.
I
And
think that's a fabulous advertisement.
they're thriving, aren't they? I mean,
Yeah.
they're all looking fantastic.
What constitutes a really good dried flower?
Well, what we're looking for is something that dries quickly, dries well, and holds its form and holds the shape well.
Yeah. The French call them immortelles, don't they? I always think that's quite nice.